Welcome to episode 3 of Fireside Philosophy. Today, I'm joined with Matt the Mad Dog Nelson to talk about competition and a little bit of toxic masculinity as well. Mad Dog, how you doing today?
Good. It's nice to be fireside. Nice warm fire on these the cool late spring nights.
Yeah. I can't wait. Want to hop right into it today?
Sure. Let's
Awesome.
go.
So let's start out with competition. You're a big sports guy. You
Yes.
commentate sports. I know you're a big sports fan. I know you're a big Bruins guy. Obviously, sports are a competitive thing. What do you think it is that really drives competition in people? What makes people want to be competitive?
So there's two, I think, main reasons that people want to be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
One is to be better than everyone else. And the second would be to prove to yourself that you're better than your current self.
Yeah.
You're always trying to improve upon yourself. And you can see the different schools of thoughts in professional athletics.
Sure.
You've got people like LeBron James that are very in your face about the fact that they're the best basketball player on the planet.
Right.
Michael Jordan wasn't so in your face about it.
Okay.
I mean, he knew he was the greatest and he acted appropriately. But then you've got like Patrice Burr, you've got the quiet leaders
Yeah.
that just play the game because they love it.
Sure.
And, you know, they just try to keep getting better than they're currently at every day.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think you can definitely see that in like every area. You know, sports, also like with like jobs or really anything. You can really tell the difference between when people are being competitive with themselves and when they're just trying to be better than others. And it definitely shows. I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it because I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it's also like part of our like nature to be competitive in a way. That, you know, we're always trying to be, whether it be better than ourselves or better than others. I feel like competition's a thing we see in like a lot of like animals and like beings, always trying to like survive. I think maybe was like where it started, competition for survival. And then once like survival didn't really become a day-to-day issue, it was more about like what other ways can like you feed that like competitive nature. And I think like sports is part of that.
Well, it also goes into more than sports, like in high school.
Sure.
It's a competition to be valedictorian.
Yeah.
It's a competition for, you know, if you're part of the school of thought that you're trying to better yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you're always trying to get better grades.
Yeah.
If you're trying to be better than everyone else, you want to be valedictorian or salutatorian at graduation.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You really do see competition everywhere. And I think a big part of it is that with a lot of things in life, you know, like there's only one valedictorian, you know? There can only be
Right?
one number
There's only
one.
one trophy.
Yeah, right. So I think that is a big part of it. You know, you want that goal at the end of the track there. You want to be able to prove to yourself or to others that you really can do whatever it is that you're doing. I think that competition and being competitive can be both like a good thing and a bad thing, you know, because on one hand, if you're not competitive with yourself, you're never really going to push yourself. That would kind of mean that like you're just going to be where you are and that will be it. And you're not going to really have that motivation to maybe try something new or work harder. Right. Or go on that diet or like whatever it may be, you know. But on the other hand, if you're too competitive and you worry more about like being better than other people, it can be really like isolating, and then, you know, you don't exactly get on everyone's good side when you're just like doing things particularly to be better than other people.
Yeah, there's definitely a fine line. There's complacency, which is just living to live.
Yeah.
There's that middle ground where you're trying to better yourself. And then there's the other far extreme, which is trying to outdo everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times people will sometimes even like pretend they're going after that middle ground, but you can tell they're really going after, you know, like being better than everyone else.
Yeah, they're close to the line.
Yeah.
And they're trying to toe that line. Which is understandable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a very competitive person just by nature.
Yeah.
I played sports growing up. I commentate sports now. I'm consistently around athletes. It's definitely like, yeah, there's people who try to toe the line, but from the other side of it.
Yeah, for sure. I find myself to be fairly competitive with some things. I'm not really a sports guy, but maybe with like, whether it be like, I don't know, like video games, or like maybe we're doing, I don't know, I'm a chess guy. I like chess. I get pretty competitive with chess. Board games, I get very competitive. Stuff like that. I think like wanting to win isn't a bad thing. You know, everyone wants to win in some ways.
But it's the reason, for
why
which
you're
you
winning.
want to win that's the issue.
Important, right? Yeah, I agree.
If you want to win just to say, I won,
Right.
that's not a good reason.
Yeah.
If you want to win to prove to yourself that you can do something,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay.
That's positive.
More power to you.
Right. That's definitely very interesting, because you definitely do see those people who walk the line, and then there's always that aspect of, even if you're winning for the right reasons, a lot of people aren't going to like you. Not everyone likes the winners, you know, especially the people that you're competing against. You see that with, like, let's say Elon Musk, right? He has been very successful, and, you know, there's a lot of people that don't like him because of his success. You know, with competition also comes, like, jealousy.
Right.
So.
Right. But that's across the board. I mean, Elon Musk is a great example. He built himself
Yeah.
out of the middle of South Africa in poverty.
And he worked hard.
And he's literally about to fly people to the moon because of how hard he's worked over time.
Right, and he wants to put people on Mars.
He wants people on Mars. He's trying to, you know, save the planet with his cars.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's the right way or not is still being debated.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, he's definitely, throughout his life, he's tried to better himself and better humanity with technological advancements.
Yeah.
But then you've got other people who are, not to get too deep into politics, but our former president, who, you know, it's all me.
Right. Yeah, sure. You see that, you know, like with Elon Musk, you know, he always is bettering himself, and like even in like interviews and stuff, you know, he's always talking about like how he can improve and like what he wants to do next. I feel like he doesn't really like dwell on what he's done in the past. He really is always talking about like pushing forward. So
yeah, he's blown up a lot of rockets.
Yeah.
And his response to blowing up the rockets, not on purpose, was, we got a lot of great data. Can't wait for the next launch.
Right. Yeah. That's the type of competition like you want, because he, you know, could have just like settled and lived like a normal life, but he is trying to like change the world, and I think competition can do that. Like that self-competition to do better and to like do better for humanity is like super cool, and there's plenty of people who do that, and that's where like competition can be like a good thing.
But the other side of that line, with that particular example, would be Jeff Bezos.
Sure.
He only got into the space game to try to outdo Elon Musk.
Right. I know you and Mr. Bezos have history, Mad Dog.
Yes.
If you want to briefly discuss.
I once talked to Jeff Bezos at like 4 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. So it was only 1 o'clock in the morning Seattle time. This was back when I was working at Amazon in Stoughton. And there was an incident where the entire logistics system went down, and I happened to be the one to find it. So I got the call. That was interesting. He was very upset that he was woken up at 1 a.m.
Yeah, right.
Which is understandable.
Yes. But yes, to stay on track, I do see your point here, where, you know, that was a perfect example of, you know, competition where he's just trying to outdo someone else. And that is the type of competition, you know, unfortunately you see all too often.
Right.
You know?
But you can see how he's personally changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Back when he was in a garage trying to create Amazon, he was trying to better himself in the world.
Right.
And since he's accomplished that, I think it's spun a little bit to the extreme.
Yeah, and I think like competition and winning can definitely like change you. You know, it feels good to win. And when you're winning and, you know, succeeding that much, like it changes people, you know.
Absolutely.
So,
Our former quarterback, Tom Brady,
right.
winning and winning and winning. And then for whatever reason now he's in Tampa Bay.
Right. Yeah. Competition is definitely something it's so weird because it's something you want and it's something you need. You know, it's such a positive thing in some ways, but if you go too far, it can be such like a toxic thing and like really like break connections in your life with people. You know, if you're trying to be more competitive than like your friends or your family, you know, that can really like break bonds and upset people. So it's a fine line, but it's definitely important.
Absolutely. And not to jump the gun, but it leads directly into
Let's go for it.
toxic masculinity.
Let's do it.
Competition, I think, is a major aspect of toxic masculinity, because toxic masculinity, I think, is all about control.
Sure.
So from that aspect, I think most people who exhibit toxic masculinity are doing so because they're, I don't know whether afraid is the right word, or jealous of any perceived competition.
Right.
If you're in a relationship with somebody and you're demonstrating toxic masculinity, wanting to know where they are 24/7,
Right.
want to know who they're talking to, that's because of jealousy of perceived competition.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think like a lot of times like toxic masculinity gets like misconstrued in like the media and stuff like that. And I think people kind of like take it to like spots where it really shouldn't be. And kind of like maybe say someone's being like exhibiting toxic masculinity when they aren't. But I think you had a good description of it. I think toxic masculinity does stem from, you know, those people that we were talking about that, you know, are trying to, you know, triumph over others and in that type of competition. I think those are the people that end up displaying toxic masculinity because, you know, if they're super competitive in that way where they're being competitive to overshadow others and to become better than them, when, you know, there's like any risk of them not being the best, that's when you start to see those things, you know?
Right. And you see it on the field too. The people that are trying to control everything that goes on the field.
Right.
Whether it's, you know, a player he could be a phenomenal player, but trying to control every little aspect on the field, that's someone who I would say is more willing, or not more willing, but more apt to display the toxic masculinity.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But there's a difference between being a leader on the field,
right,
and being someone who's trying to control what's going on.
Right, and I think that's where it can sometimes get misconstrued, you know. I think like with a lot of like labels like that, like toxic masculinity, I think like a big problem with them is they'll get like overused on people that like aren't.
Absolutely.
And then any label like that, you know, and when that happens, it kind of loses its meaning, because when you're, you know, saying that people are exhibiting toxic masculinity when they're not, you know, that almost like discredits the people who are actually doing this thing, you know?
Right. And it leads into, you know, cancel culture a little bit as well.
Right.
It's not necessarily that we're trying to cancel people. It's that we're trying to hold people accountable for their actions in the past.
Yeah.
And most of the actions that are being discussed that happened however many years ago, I know of at least I think a state representative in New York that got into some issues back, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And people are calling for him to resign 20 years later.
Right.
Because of his toxic masculine environment, I guess, 20 years ago.
Right.
it's a whole big thing. I don't think that we're trying to cancel people. I think people should be held accountable
Yeah.
if there's something to hold them accountable for.
Yeah.
If so much time has passed and these people have definitely demonstrated
Change.
that they've changed,
Right.
I don't personally see a need to see repercussions so many years later.
I agree. Let's definitely talk about this because this is very interesting. My problem, with like cancel culture, like I look at the biggest one. I'm a movie guy, so one of the biggest one, and I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as you know. So one of the biggest ones that hit me was when James Gunn was fired for tweets that were 10 years old. See, what I have a problem with there is it de-incentivizes change and self-improvement. Because if I do something wrong, right, and I know that no matter what I do, I'm going to be held accountable for it for the rest of my life. Doesn't matter if I do a 180, become a whole different person 10, 20 years down the line. If I know that someone's just going to, hold me accountable for it, especially with like something like that where it's like tweets, where, there were some like insensitive jokes that may not have been as insensitive for the time. But if I know someone's, just going to do that, if I make one mistake, there's no point in changing. Because no matter how much you change, you're still, going to be punished for it.
Right.
So I think that's scary that, you're de-incentivizing change through that. There's no reason to better yourself if it's not going to make a difference. If the whole point of, being able to better yourself is that so you can secure a better future and, make a different path than the path you maybe were going on 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it kind of eliminates like second chances in any way.
Yeah, not that I've necessarily posted anything
Yeah, neither have I.
in the last however long since I've had social media, but I still find myself checking through the memories every single day just to say, could this be perceived
Right.
as something it's not?
Yeah.
And if I can take a few minutes and see that it's going to be, or there's a small chance that somebody perceives it as something attacking somebody, I end up deleting it.
Right.
And it's not because I'm trying to attack people. It's because I don't want to offend anybody,
Yeah.
but I also think in this day and age that some people are looking for a reason to be offended.
I agree. Yeah. You could even really spin that as like part of like competition, where people, want to be treated certain, like people will get offended by certain things.
Right. And that competition would be, how do we not necessarily rehabilitate this person in their thoughts? It's how do we make this person disappear from everyday life?
Right. And that's like, yeah, right. Because they're not trying to, like with cancel culture, let's say they're trying to cancel someone, they're not trying to like make them change or make this drastic difference. There's no incentive for that. They're just trying to eliminate.
They're just trying to get rid of them.
And a lot of times it's similar, like we were talking about with toxic masculinity. Like the people that should be canceled need to be canceled. But then also people who maybe don't need to be canceled, they're also coming after these people, maybe because of their opinions and stuff like that, and then digging things up about them that, like you said, weren't intended one way but could be perceived one way. So now it kind of, just like with toxic masculinity, ruins cancel culture in a way, because now we're not just going after these people that should be, like deplatformed or whatever, like that are maybe like calling to action and like causing violence with their words, and like causing other people to cause violence. Instead of going after those people, they're now going after people who made jokes on Twitter 10 years ago. So then that almost like
Right.
decredits that whole thing.
I do think there's a need for change, but I don't think cancel culture is necessarily 100% on the mark.
Yeah, I agree.
Like our prison system, which I'll admit is very flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Their motto is rehabilitation.
Right.
People go there to be rehabilitated.
Sure.
And that's, I mean, I think that's almost kind of what cancel culture should turn into. Instead of just saying, this elected official posted a picture of himself wearing blackface 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to resign today. I don't necessarily think that he needs to resign. I think he needs to be told what's wrong with that action.
Right.
And for him to see that.
Yeah.
Or her to see that.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Disincentivizing change like that, you know, making it so that there's really no chance once something happens, really, it's just not positive. You see all these stories about people who turn their lives around. Look at like Robert Downey Jr. Well, like, if he got canceled, he might have never gone on to do what he did. You know what I mean?
And there's still a small faction of people out there that say he once was arrested, right? He shouldn't be this role model for kids.
Right, right. And, you know, he doesn't, like, deserve this or that.
But
and,
it's,
like,
I think it's admirable how he's turned his life around. I think he is a role model
for me because, I mean, I'm not someone who's gotten into trouble like that, and I don't intend on getting into any trouble like that. But I don't know if I'd say he's a role model because my experiences doesn't really line up with his. But I think it's admirable, like you said, that someone was in so deep and they were able to turn their life around and make something out of it, you know? So now, I mean, I have no intention of doing anything like that, but if I mess up in a different way, I can know that, all right, if he can turn his life around, then I can, you know?
Right.
So.
But cancel culture also didn't exist in the time.
Exactly.
Necessarily before Iron Man was released in 2008.
Right. And now that he's big, he's kind of grandfathered in. And, you know,
yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to be canceling him. But you're right, there are people who say, you know, he shouldn't be a role model, and he shouldn't be this and that. So,
but you see it again in professional athletes like Ray Rice, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. You know, he was a phenomenal athlete, and he was a team player, and everybody loved him. But then you see what happened in his personal life. He had to control his, I think, fiance at the time, and they were in, I believe, Atlantic City, and in an elevator, something happened, and he punched her because he was trying to have control over whatever situation they were in.
Right.
But he's also been effectively blacklisted from the NFL.
Yeah.
Because of that action.
Right. I mean, something, you know, what cancel culture should do is disincentivize people from doing bad things, right? Because like you said, you look through your your post history and stuff, even though you know you didn't do anything like overtly wrong, you check it. And I think like that is a thing where it's like, okay, it disincentivizes just using these platforms to do and say whatever you want. It's like, okay, well, you can't do this because you can be canceled. But it gets taken too far, and people get canceled for things they shouldn't be canceled for. Or when they are canceled, it's not done the correct way, right? And I think that's also like part of toxic masculinity and part of competition, because people are trying to get other people out of the game, whether it's the direct, like the, you know, Hollywood. They're trying to get other people out of Hollywood, or they're trying to, you know,
it's
get other athletes
victory
out.
by elimination.
Right. And I think that's a big part of it. Like, how much do people really care about some of these things that people are getting canceled for? Obviously, there's some severe things that people should be canceled for, and but how much, like, let's say I hate James Gunn. Do I really care? Like, am I really offended by the tweets? Like, someone really just dug those up and found them just to cancel him.
Right.
Like, they're not offended by the tweets, and that's why they're canceling him. They're trying to get him out of there, and that's why they're canceling him. So it's like, that's definitely, the elimination there is definitely part of competition. And it's even, you know, like setting like standards, like, oh, you know, I'm better because I, you know, haven't said anything like that, or I haven't done anything that could be interpreted different ways, you know? Like, it's kind of like that standard that you're setting, like a competitive standard.
But in the same token, so since you're the movie guy.
Sure.
In the Star Wars and MCU.
Oh, yeah.
let's talk about Gina Carano.
Yeah.
Should she be canceled for her tweets over COVID?
Yeah, that stuff is crazy. I think Gina, she works for Disney, and she knew what she was doing when she was pushing those buttons and saying what she was saying. You know, I feel like Gina knew she was pushing it with Disney, and I think that's what they were really upset with. Because after like warnings and like PR people and, you know, like a lot of controversy already going around, she kind of like seemed to overtly push it.
But should you let someone's personal posts and political beliefs, if she could be the greatest actress in the entire world, should her personal beliefs and political posts that she wasn't doing on company time be used against her?
See, I don't think so. She's not calling to action. She's not being violent from what I read. But it's also, to me, doesn't feel like it's applied equally to all actors and whatnot. I know that, you know, Gina had referenced certain events that people didn't like, but Pedro Pascal, who's on the same show, has alluded to the same events and gotten in no trouble. But he was on the other side of things, you know? So I think if it is going to be done, it better be done equitably. I mean, I don't want either of them fired. I love Pedro Pascal. I thought Gina did fine on the show. But it's a tricky situation where, you know, Disney has the right to do that. You know, they employed her. They can fire her. And it's just hard because it really did feel like she was pushing their buttons. And I don't know. What do you think about that whole situation?
I think she was setting it up
Yeah.
for herself to kind of play whatever card she wanted to play. Because the day that she was terminated, officially, she announced she's doing a documentary with Ben Shapiro.
In the Daily Wire, yeah.
So I think she was almost kind of baiting Disney.
That's what it felt like. That's what I'm kind of saying. Like you know, there would be a controversy, and then she'd go ahead and like do another thing. And you know, like we're in a world where like when you're getting hired, they do look at your social media pages and stuff like that. Because although she's not technically representing the company, you know, you kind of are, because you're still an employee. And you know, in a world where like so much cancel culture does happen, like maybe it doesn't look good for like Disney to have one of their people canceled, you know. So that's just such a tricky situation. So
But then in the same token, from another angle,
go for it.
the owners of Chick-fil-A, they're very, very, very political. And they're on one extreme of the aisle.
Yeah.
And, you know, the LGBTQ issues, you know, they have their thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think that taking a strong stance can sometimes also be a competitive thing, because they are now using that to draw a certain audience and be better. You know what I mean?
But should Chick-fil-A as a chain, when they make a heck of a chicken sandwich,
Sure.
but should they be canceled because of what their owners are doing with their personal time and ideas?
Right. Well, that's another thing that's difficult. Like, how do you separate like the art from the artist in that sense? You know, definitely a crazy thing there. It is just, you know, there's so many different ways, you know, with like cancel culture and like different methods at competition in that way, where, you know, people will use any and all methods to get ahead, you know, and I think all that is part of competition. You know, it's almost in that way people thinking that they're better than others, like, oh, you know, I am on this morally high ground, so I can say what you're doing is wrong.
Right,
you
but
know?
morally
It's the
high
control.
to who?
Exactly.
Everyone's got different morals.
Yeah. That's what causes controversy, and that's why there's always multiple sides to everything, and everyone doesn't just agree on, you know, every decision that's made. Competition takes, you know, many forms, and there's a lot of ways people try and get ahead, and, you know, we got into the reasons why people do it, and I think you're right. I think those are the two fundamental reasons, and you know, we explored a lot of, you know, why people might pursue that toxic side of competition and how they do it. So I think this was very thought-provoking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Very nice and toasty here.
Yeah, I know, right? Before we go, Mad Dog, I just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done on the show. You've been a big part of helping the show get started, and many of our other shows as our ongoing productions here at Abington Cam. And it's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm glad I could have you on Fireside Philosophy.
Not a problem. As you guys, I'm sure, know by now, myself and Kevin Tachi, our executive director, are here to serve not just you guys, our interns, but the entire community of Abington. So seeing you guys put a dream first on paper and then helping you transform that into what this is, that's the whole point of why ACAM is here.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see more shows happen in the future. Well, thank you for watching Fireside Philosophy Episode 3. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for Episode 4 coming soon. Thank you.